I'm Kyle Milani, and together with Sebastian, we'll be introducing the Data Hub Service. As you guys can clearly see from the attire, I'm the technical guy and he's the business guy.
At least today.
Yeah, so in the agenda, I'll be covering most of the business aspects of the service, and Sebastian, who is really the staff engineer here, will be talking about the architecture. But when I talk about the business aspects of the service, I will highlight and do a demo for us to understand the Data Hub. It's important to understand a few concepts of the Data Hub, because when he talks about the architecture of the service, we made many things in the architecture to the Data Hub work better. Before I do my demo about the Data Hub, I want to talk about the motivation to create a service. We have heard from many customers along the last 2 years that they were struggling with their agility to do data integration. And there are two aspects that they were struggling regarding the agility. One, they were using old technology, old relational tools to do data integration, and that it was slowing down. Okay, so MarkLogic helped them solve that. But they were still leading to another problem that Gary highlighted this morning, the fight with IT. They were struggling to get hardware. They were waiting for IT to help them provision, and that was slowing down. It was not uncommon for us to wait longer to get hardware for the project than the project took to be implemented. So really, customers are really struggling with that. Some customers tried to go to the cloud and use cloud solutions. And what happened, if you look at what are the offerings out there from the cloud providers, they have one solution for relational, one for graph, one for documents, another solution to do ETL. So they end up with data sprawl. They only moved the problem to the cloud. They didn't do really data integration. And a side effect of moving to the cloud that many of our customers mention is when they start using these solutions, they end up overspending. If you're familiar with solutions from cloud providers, some go to the point of charging for the I/O of a query. Imagine telling a developer that, oh, you have to figure out how many IOPS you will do in a query, because there's a cost behind that. So it was really hard for our customers to understand how much money they would spend. So we heard this from customer and customer again, and we decided to help customers solve this problem. The first thing that we did, as mentioned, last year we made the Data Hub part of the product. It's a supported solution, and what the Data Hub brings is it accelerates the development of a data integration solution. You ingest data as is, and in the same platform you can do all the harmonization, the mastering, and you don't have to use separate tools. And also it's the same platform that will control access to the data. And here in the right side we can see you can use the same platform to do transactional, analytical, or even use data for machine learning. And Sebastian will cover in detail what we have special about the service to help you do all those things in parallel. So this was introduced as a product last year, and what we are introducing this year is, in more detail, is the Data Hub Service. The Data Hub Service is the best way for you to get to the Data Hub. It's the fastest way. As mentioned, in about 15 minutes you can have a Data Hub running. And it's a predictable cost. I will cover, as I said, the business aspects, why it's predictable, and why it will address all the aspects of data sprawl and unpredictable spending. If you were to think about what is the Data Hub Service, it's the combination of all the aspects of the Data Hub that allow you to do fast data integration, low that is, same platform to do harmonization, mastering, with the aspects of a cloud service. We take care of all the automation, and we'll cover in detail when you get to the technical aspects, everything that happens when you create a service. But it also has a very cost-effective way. This is the most cost-effective way of running the Data Hub. And I'll cover that in my session. And everything that we do in MarkLogic, we do for enterprise-grade applications. Everything. In terms of security, in terms of reliability. So everything that we do here, it follows the same pattern. And we'll cover the security aspects, the high availability of the solution. And this is not just a database as a service solution, it's a full integrated stack. So as I said, many customers that just move to the cloud, what they end up having? They end up having one solution for graph, one for relational, one for document, another solution for search, and something to glue it up together. Here is the same solution, The data will reside in one solution, and you can use that to solve all your problems related to data integration. Everything is out of the box. As I said, I want to demonstrate a little bit the Data Hub, because there's an important aspect that I want to talk about here, which is harmonization. It's one of the capabilities of the Data Hub, but it's important to understand a little bit, okay, ingestion, harmonization. So when we get to the technical side, we understand the choices of the architecture. Okay, so I'll be doing a demonstration about harmonization. In my use case here, I am harmonizing data from two different sources. I have a source from UK and another source from US. There is a small difference between the two sources, and therefore I will have to do a mapping. What I have here is the quick start environment, which is where you develop. I already loaded some data. As you can see, when you load data, it goes to staging. After you harmonize the data, it goes to the final. This is an important aspect of here, the topology of the solution. Every data that gets ingested as is goes to staging. And everything that happens to the data, all the provenance is stored in the jobs. So you know what happened to the data, how the data was ingested, and how it was harmonized. That's why we have twice the quantity here. My solution here that I'm working on is a customer 360, and everything that we do in the hub is in the context of an entity. So I created this entity here, which is a customer, and I have those attributes. Those are the things that are important to me in this application, this customer 360. I'm loading again data from two sources, and I will ensure that everything is around the entity. What is the benefit of the entity? The end-up developer in the downstream application only has to understand the entity. They don't need to understand the sources. In my example, only ingesting from two sources, but imagine you keep adding sources. As you keep ingesting different sources, you keep harmonizing. The developers downstream, they don't really understand the sources. They only need to understand the entity. That's one of the aspects of the entity. Okay, so I have this entity here. As I mentioned, I already loaded some data. I just want to show a little bit the data that I already loaded. First, this is the data from the UK subsidiary of this company. And what we do here, we have what is called an envelope pattern. So at the bottom, we have the source data. This is the data as it was ingested. This is already a harmonized version. And in my example, it's very simple here. I'm adopting the UK as my canonical model. If you pay attention to the names of the elements, they're pretty much the same. Okay, so I adopted that those labels will be the same, and I mapped everything to the customer. So again, what the developer has to understand, just the entity, just the customer. Okay, that's the first data they already loaded. Okay, now I will go and load the second set of data, which will be data from my US subsidiary. First thing that is different here, this is JSON documents. The other ones were XML documents. No problem. MarkLogic is a multimodal database. Okay, this is my source. I'm loading my data. As I said, every time that you start loading data, it will load data to staging. So where that data is going, it's going to staging. So at this point, every data that I load now from the US subsidiary, it's only in staging. What do I need to do? I need to harmonize and send to final. But let's take a look at the data. Okay, so I'm in staging here, and I'll look into some of the JSON documents that I just uploaded to the Data Hub. First, it's JSON, it's slightly different. But one thing that is different from the UK, this is using something called zip code, and the UK data is using postal code. I will only exemplify that, but real life is much more complicated. Each source may be completely different from the other source. Here I'm only going to exemplify this simple harmonization. So what I need to do is I need to create a mapping. That will map my new data to the entity. So here at the right side, I have the entity. Very simple here. As I'm saying, my example is only to illustrate what harmonization is. pretty much everything maps to the same in the entity. Except the zip code. So here I'm just mapping my zip code to postal code. I save my mapping, and now I can go and do the next step in my harmonization, which is I'll create the harmonization flow. Sorry. Okay, so here I select, I just created this mapping, so I will apply this mapping. I'll just run my harmonization and I'll take a look at the data. So again, the data now is moving from staging to final. Let's look at the final data. So at the bottom again, I have the data as it was ingested. And you can see there was a zip code, but now harmonized, it's using postal code. And the next source may be completely different, maybe not even customer ID, maybe just ID. And you keep doing this harmonization flows. Let's just give an overview of the Data Hub. It has many more capabilities like mastering, but I think it's important for us to understand what is a harmonization, what is a flow when we talk about the architecture of the Data Hub service. Okay, so I created this solution here, and we'll now go and throughout and we'll demonstrate how to use the same flows that we created here in the Data Hub service. So what do you get when you are using the Data Hub service? The Data Hub service will be the fastest way for you to deploy that flow that you created. In a matter of minutes, you can have a hub running, and you don't have to worry about how to set up MarkLogic, how to maintain MarkLogic, how to monitor MarkLogic. Everything will be taken care of by the service. This also will be the most cost-effective way for you to run those flows. And it will explain why it provides a predictable low cost even when demand spikes. And as I said, everything is highly available and reliable. Okay, let me drill down into the business aspect of the predictable cost. This is the portal where you create a service. Justin demonstrated this morning. You will go and select the capacity. The capacity is based on how much data you want to save to the Data Hub service. So here exemplifying 3 terabytes. So this is a capacity that is good for 3 terabytes of data. You will create this, and the concept that allows the predictability of the cost is the credits. So let me explain a little bit of the credits. Best way to explain the credits is thinking about a bucket. So you subscribe to, let's say, 96 capacity, and you have what we call the baseline. So every hour, you are receiving 96 units of capacity. At the bottom here of the bucket, we have utilization. What is utilization? If you're running queries, if you're running ingestion, or if you are harmonizing or curating data, you are consuming the service. If nothing is happening, if you're not running queries, assume that consumption is 0. It's still available, everything is ready for you to use, but if you're not using, consumption is 0. So anytime that consumption is below baseline, you accumulate. So the credits will start to accumulate. There is a limit. We limit this to 12 times the amount of baseline. Another way of looking into this is the bucket. Another way of looking into this is through a chart. The green line is what I like to call the money line. As you can see, the money line is flat. I subscribe to a service that will not change. In my example here, it's 48, it will be $6 per hour. Will not change. I subscribe to that. The red line represents utilization. As you can see, during the night, utilization was always below the baseline. So there was something going on. Some customers were running queries, but not to the point of going above the baseline. So every time that utilization is below my green line, what happens? I'm accumulating credits. So that's the first part of the chart. I'm accumulating credits. In this scenario, which is very common, there are two spikes in demand, one in the morning and one in the end of the day. Because there were credits available, you can see that that peak at the morning is almost 3 times the baseline. So we provisioned capacity to serve those queries and that harmonization because there was enough credits available. Compare this to what you would need to do in the data center. If you were to serve that capacity, what do you have to do? You have to have the hardware around. You have to have everything pre-configured. So you're pretty much, you have to pay that cost. Here, you're paying the baseline cost, kind of a third of what you would need to do in the data center if you think about it. And again, there is this other peak at the end of the day. Everything was served because you accumulated credits. I'll take questions at the end, okay? Thank you. All right, so with that, Sebastian will explain the architecture, will explain how it auto scales and how we secure data and other aspects of the service. At the end, I will take questions about my part as well.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So with this, I would like to go more into details, what we actually are provisioning behind the scenes, give you a little bit of secrets, what we actually do behind the scenes. So with this, we'll have to look at this whole section. I'll try to use the nomenclature that you might be familiar with, even if you're not familiar with the specifics of AWS, as probably many of you are, but not all of you. So at the top, we can see here, there's basically the client side or the customer side, so that will be most likely you when you choose to run the service. And as you can see, there is a couple of nomenclature or names that might be quite unfamiliar for you, such as the VPC. If you've heard of AWS, it's called Virtual Private Cloud, which is a fancy name, in essence, for a network. So that's what you're provisioning here on top. That will be the network that would be provisioned in your own AWS account, in which you will be running your client side. So you will be using your known MarkLogic tools for like DM SDK in your Java app, MLCP. You can leverage RESTful APIs, our RESTful APIs to different clients, such as NiFi or other solutions. Also, you can build your Java or Node.js applications with our native clients. And also, for your analytical workload, you may leverage Tableau or Power BI and access our ODBC endpoint. So, and also in terms of security and access, another very important factor for this solution is that you're running, in particular for production workloads, you're running your own LDAP server in your own network. That's what you can see here on this side. Okay, so let's try to debug the bottom side a little bit more. So as you can see here, we have another VPC here. So why we do have another VPC? Per AWS best recommendations, we actually, for each of our customers that sign up to the AWS Marketplace, we create a separate AWS account in order to get the best security and isolation, which follows the guidelines coming from AWS. So as you can see here, we have another VPC, which is again just a network, but this time is in our account on our side, in which we are provisioning this whole infrastructure that I will go into in a second. But before I go there, there is an additional quadrant here in which you can see VPC peering. What does that mean? Again, a fancy name from AWS, but that basically means that we're combining the two networks together in one. And that's what you can see here. So in order for your client side to consume the service, they have to be able to talk to each other. And that's what the peering is for. Okay? So even if you see these fancy names, it's nothing special behind the scenes there. So in terms of what you will see as a person who is consuming the service, you will not see what's inside. That's the whole point. We're isolating from you. So we can get the best performance without managing MarkLogic by yourself. What you will see by yourself, that will be a set of load balancers, like this one, and this ones. So those are layer 7 application load balancers on AWS, if you're familiar with that. Plus, there is another one that is not shown here, which is a layer 4 ODBC load balancer, specifically for your Power BI connections or Tableau. And that's what you will see as a person who is consuming this service. There is no admin UI, nothing. However, I want to give you a little bit more information about where's the elastic part and where's the advantage of using this solution. So as you can see, we have at the bottom here a set of D nodes, so where your data resides, and this is the static part of the cluster. However, we have a set of 3 elastic set of nodes that are specifically E-nodes, our evaluator nodes. If you're not too familiar with MarkLogic and relatively new, those are your query nodes. And since those nodes are not containing any data, they can actually scale out easily. So depending on the workload, if it's coming on the endpoint on this ingestion curation load balancer, it will see that there will be a spike by, for instance, CPU or memory, and it automatically will scale out within that group to a set of E-nodes. So the question is, considering what Kyle said about this line and spiking, so we have the baseline that will give you a set of E-nodes, and when the spikes occurs, you will not see that directly. You can actually look at the meters data to see that. They will add more E-nodes for supporting your workload. So thanks to this approach, you can get very high scalable workload edge ingestion, curation, where you do your harmonization. And also, you can separately scale your operational workload and also the analytical workload at the end. So as you can see, compared to the classical approach when you have your operational data, ETL, and analytics in a data warehouse that most of you are familiar with, that has been developed for a long time, here in MarkLogic, you can actually leverage all these 3 functionality all in one place, which is one of the best advantages of using this service. So let's look what are the actual responsibilities on in terms of what MarkLogic does. So we do provide you a platform for deployment to a specific management console, and we'll see that during the demo. We provide all the infrastructure automatically. Everything is configured for you, and we do automated backups behind the scenes. We also, depending on the capacity slider that Kaya mentioned and you've seen before, we also choose the correct sizes of virtual machines behind the scenes, depending on what is the size of the service that you chose. And it automatically scales, as I mentioned before, which specifically means scaling out in those groups. We also follow the best practices on MarkLogic side, like with the local disk failover for data. We'll do for you performance upgrades and patching of the OS and MarkLogic as well. Monitor 24/7 and obviously support for the service. In terms of what's under the cover, so if you've seen the deployment of the Data Hub on your own local machine, it's actually very similar. The difference is that you're deploying this on a cluster. So you have a set of databases, the one that also Kaya mentioned before, so staging, final, and a set of app servers on which you actually will run your flows or have an ODBC connection or the one for operations or analysis. And that was separated, as you've seen, in those 3 set of dynamic E-nodes on the architecture side. So this is all pre-built in, which is one of the decisions that we made to make it easier on you. So you cannot add or remove app servers. This is hard-coded and predefined. You cannot change that. Everything is highly available by leveraging MarkLogic capabilities. Everything is configured as best as it can be for a specific size of the service that you will choose. So how about security? I already kind of mentioned that in terms of the LDAP. So we do follow the best recommendation, and some of those recommendations are actually coming from the certifications that we're pursuing. So we expect the customers to use their own LDAP. However, we don't allow you to add specific roles that are outside of the scopes that are defined here. So as a service admin, you are actually allowed to combine multiple roles and customize that. However, you cannot get outside of the scope of all these roles that are defined here on the right side. So let's switch now and talk about and look at the Data Hub Service demo. So with this is the our so-called portal in which you can log in. If you are familiar with AWS, that's basically like the AWS Management Console, but for the Data Hub service. So you just log in. So as you can see here, we have already one service which is running. But let's start from scratch and have a new network, and like you would log in for the first time when there is nothing. So as I said before, we need to create a network. So here there's your view of networks. Kind of, if you're familiar with AWS, that will be your list of VPCs. And you just click on the network button. You have to give it a name. Let's give this one a name, and select the region that you want to deploy a solution. As you can see here in this example, there is very few things to select because we're not peering the connection. If you want to have peering, there is much more information that has to be provided actually to make it happen, like what's the account, what's the role, what are the IP ranges. So it might be a little bit difficult in the beginning, but after a while, and in particular if you take your network team to help you to set this up, that's actually the recommended way to do it for anything that is more serious than a, let's say, small POC without any data. Because if you choose this option, all the endpoints will be completely public, which will also give you a warning during the provisioning time. So I just click on configure. So you will see here a couple of steps. In reality, it's not that fast. It takes a couple of minutes, but for the sake of this demo, this will work. So you can see here the new network created in this section, and you can see a comparison to the one of the networks here who is actually peered. As you can see, there is more information here, such as the VPC ID in that other account, and also what is the account that will be your customer account that you have your own. And also there is a special role that allows us to combine these two networks together in one. So now we have a network. We're ready to create the service. So in order to create the service, you just provide a name. You select the network. As you can see here, it's the East Public that you created before. And as you can see, it's public as we selected the public network before. And we'll create the smallest capacity here, which is 32, and burst 384 and 1 terabyte of data. So in terms of what Kaya was saying, your green line is this particular value, right? So that's your constant value. The burst capacity is how much you can accumulate in that bucket, which is up to 384. How do you consume those credits? It's actually when you're scaling out one of these groups, so you're adding nodes behind the scenes, and you go over a specific capacity, so you're consuming your burst number, which is here. As you can see, the cost is fixed. It's $4 per hour. And as you can see, we're warning you that you're using a public VPC here. So we confirm. And now you can click on View here. And you can see that the request is initiated. And also, again, this will take a little bit longer in reality. But when the service is provisioned, now since we're not setting the LDAP, we need to add a user to the service. So for that particular purpose, you click on Manage Access, and you add a user. So we add the user here, then we go to the next one. All right, and we assign a set of roles. for the purpose of this example, we can use all of them. And also, obviously, we have to provide a password. All right, add. So the user has been added. So actually, the user is stored in MarkLogic. We cannot access that at all. And now all the endpoints that you can see here, so manage, rest, it's now ungraded out, and you can access those endpoints. So this is basically the process of creating the service. So let's move on now and see how can we consume the service with a simple example that is a segue to what Kaio did. So first you have to configure your Gradle properties file. And what you will see here is that the file will have to change from your local host to your ingestion curation host, as you can see. You can see that on top of here. So whatever you did on your laptop before, you usually use this local host. Here, you're just replacing this with the ingestion curation. Please notice here you have the IC ALB. You can quickly recognize which of those stacks you're actually accessing to. So IC stands for ingestion curation, and ALB is the type of load balancer that we use on AWS. Obviously, you have to also put your username and password that reflects the one that we just created in the service. So there are a couple of additional steps that require from you to use the service. One is to install the modules, and you need to run the following command to make this happen. This time frame is actually relatively real to what you will see in the real life compared to the other screenshots. So we'll start first the modules, as the name suggests, after the Gradle command. The next one, we need to actually load the modules, as that's what's being called in the command line here. All right. And this is relatively quick as well. So now we can proceed and ingest data from your local disk, like we did on the, like Kaio presented in his own part. So where to get that MLCP command, which is relatively complex. So the best way, you just go into flows, ingest UK subsidiary. And here you have the MLCP command that you can copy to memory, which looks quite scary, but that's the reason why I'm helping you with this one. You can copy it into the buffer. However, I would like to point out that you will have to replace, obviously, the host name, because the host name will be localhost, and you will have to also replace the username and password with the one that you use in the service creation. So this command will be already changed accordingly. So as you can see, the host name here, it's already changed to the endpoint that you've seen before. So as you can see here, we're ingesting data, but we're also doing a transformation here and here. This is also relatively in real life time. Although it depends how much data you're processing here. All right, so ingested data and transformed. So the next one will be to run one of the flows. So we'll run the flow that will actually the harmonized UK subsidiary that you've seen before. Right, this will be done soon as well. All right, it's completed. And now we can actually finally query and see the result. Please note here that now for a change, we are using a different URL just to show that you can query the final database. As you can see, the URL contains OALB, which is Operational Application Load Balancer. So we are going to query all customers which have sales in their data. Now you have to log in the UI, and it's not the UI per se, but in the endpoint. So as you can see, now we're able to query data straight away through the endpoint. So as you've seen before, we're accessing directly the endpoints, but we don't have to see what's behind the scenes, which is the whole point of the service. So as you can see during this demo, Kyle started with 2 data sources. He harmonized the data. And after that, we created the service, we loaded the data, and I've shown you how to ingest to the service and also run a flow through ML Gradle. And as a last point, we can see the modified data. So with this, I will pass the ball to Kayo.
Okay, just wrapping up here. So I talked a little bit about the concept of accumulating credits so you can use it later. So that allows you to have a predictable cost even if you have unpredictable demand. Sebastian explained how we allow you to do even that if you have competing curation, operational, and analytical workloads, and we scale independently. That's very unique. Other services, you have separate databases for that. You then have separate silos of data. Here with MarkLogic is the same data hub, allowing you to do all on top of the same data. It's much easier to govern your data, and we talk a little about all the security that is embedded and part of the Data Hub service. And of course, everything that is part of the MarkLogic security is also available here. The second aspect, as I mentioned before at the beginning, customers that try to create similar solutions using cloud providers, they end up having multiple databases, another ETL tool, a search tool. When you think about all the costs that you have with those solutions, it's actually more expensive than the Data Hub service. So the Data Hub service is the most cost-effective way for you to do data integration. And last, if you think about other solutions out there, the free software, they don't auto-scale. So if they don't auto-scale really well, what do you need to do? You have to size for the peak. So this solution is even cheaper and simpler than free software because we will auto-scale for you. Everything is part of that. So it's very price competitive and it solves better your problems. I'll open to questions, and after that I will just show, let me just show this. After this, I have another presentation that I'll talk together with Credit Suisse about the real use case of the Data Hub service. Tomorrow there is a search in the Data Hub that you can learn more about how to do search. We showed a very, very simple solution of search if you really want to know more about that. And Thursday we have a whole workshop that you pretty much do everything that we did here. You will create a flow, you will create a service, and you will deploy and use that flow. So with that, let me open to questions.
On the max credits you talked about earlier, is that like a continual number? So as you use them, can you earn them back, or is it preset or specific?
So the question is about the credits, I would say the blue line, and if they reset or if you lose them. You never lose the credits, they accumulate, and if you hit that limit, you are at that limit. But they never go away. They only go away if you use them. If you have queries coming, if you have a curation that consumes those. So they do not expire. They are always there.
But I believe you said there's a maximum accumulation that you can make.
There is a maximum accumulation. The maximum is always 12 times the baseline. Right? So that's the maximum that you can accumulate.
So what if I'm in a situation where I've put I've slid the slider, right? And I completely screwed it up. And I either got it way too high or way too low. Is there a way to monitor that? And is there a way to reset that so that either I'm not handing MarkLogic money or MarkLogic's not paying for my mess up.
Right. This chart is the real chart, so you can always see what is going on. I'm not showing here, but you can see if you under provisioned and you're running out of credits, you will easily see here. And you can go back and modify your slider. There are some limits to how low you can go because it's based on the amount of data. You cannot go too low because the system may run out of memory. But apart from that, you can move that slider and decide later, oh, I need more capacity. Oh, maybe I over-provisioned.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the burst, right? The maximum capacity, that's the burst value. That remember I was setting up 32, 384. That's the top that you can get, right?
Yeah.
And is that MCUs?
Yes.
Which will be also the red line. It can be 12 times the green line. That's the maximum capacity that we will add.
Yeah. So as you can see here, you're below. So you're accumulating, right? So you have more capacity. But whenever you go over this query here, right, you start consuming, so your bucket is emptying out, okay?
And in this example, we only went 3x. You could go up to 12x. If you have really, really high demand, we could add up to 12x. But then you burn your bucket if it's within 1 hour, pretty much.
If I go below the green line consistently, I guess I'm going to get a call from MarkLogic saying, hey, what was my...
No. You just get baseline. We are never going to call you to ask for more money. The green line is fixed. Your experience will not be perfect, and therefore you would want to change that. But we are not going to call you, right?
Okay. I'm just seeing this thing. I could be taking this for a month. So somewhere or other it's going to go in there and cap my capacity at that point.
If you're always running out, you always get baseline. That's guaranteed. Never below baseline. That's always available. But you cannot burst because you're all the time running at the maximum. That's a scenario that you all the time are running tons of queries or harmonization or analytics. Not typical. Typically during the night, to the cool-off period, you will accumulate a little bit.
Yeah, we have a question.
Can I access this programmatically so I can have my scripts monitor it and like warn me ahead of time if things are trending up and above?
Not for now, but yeah, I think
I'd have to do like a headless browser or something.
Sure, that you could do.
Yeah, but if the requirements come in, right?
Yeah,
If it's like
if
it
we
actually
see
makes
more
sense what you're
of
saying.
that, customers asking for that, sure, we can have an API for that.
So you showed a simple search example. What if I have complex search, which is not available like out of the box? Like
All capabilities of MarkLogic search are available out of the box. Everything is available. I just showed something simple just to demonstrate. You can create as complex as you want your query. It's compatible.
Okay.
Everything is available in terms of search. You can set up your indexes as you wish. I just showed that, okay, in the context of the entity, it pre-creates for you. But if you want to modify your indexes directly, you can do that. What Sebastian said that you cannot modify and add a database. But within that database, the two-stage and final, you can set up indexes as you wish.
And do I get query console access using this?
In development.
There are two types of scenarios. There is what we call production. Production, you will not get query console access.
Okay.
Only API level. You can use the API level REST API to do most of the capability of query console, but you do not have a query console straight away.
Okay. And one more question.
In development, you do have. Okay.
Yeah, and
that is this
what if I run
distinction.
out of credits? Will I get an alert? Like, if I am overshooting my capacity all the time, what will happen at that time?
Yes.
What you said. Right?
Yeah, so we are working on alerts, but to be clear, you're not getting a call. You may receive an email from the system telling you are running out of credits all the time. If you do today, you will not receive that alert, but we are working on that. We already got that feedback. Yeah. Christopher wants to talk. Christopher is our founder.
It is name your price, and you will get a level of performance commensurate with the price you're paying. So if you're paying a small amount of money, you will get resources corresponding to that small amount of money. We're not going to lose money on this, and so
Hopefully.
yeah. But
as
by
well-
naming your price is what we're going after here is you have predictability of your pricing, and that if you choose to pay very little, you get commensurate service for that, and you can decide for yourself. I'll pay more and it'll perform better, and it will.
Some level of I don't know what the right term is, but understanding of what that capacity represents, because an MCU is pretty abstract to most people.
Technically, in this description, there is an explanation. It represents the amount of memory that is available at the evaluator nodes for you to do queries. So as we add those nodes behind the scenes, you end up having more memory. And if you are consuming, it's important. It's not that it's available, it's being consumed. We may add, but you do not consume, so we get then and remove. But if it's there and you consume, you're consuming MCU. So we dynamically add memory. Think about that's what you're doing. Memory and CPU to process a harmonization. That's why I wanted to show a harmonization is a job that consumes lots of memory and CPU. So this dramatically accelerates a harmonization job dynamically because he adds.
Sebastian and I were talking about this morning about the notion to how do I figure this out based on a workload profile? How do I figure out how far across to move that slider? So I've got something that's not way out of whack when I start.
Yeah, the recommendation is you will start with the amount of data. That's how you start. Okay, I have about a terabyte of data. And that will guide you how many MCUs you should provision at the beginning. Then you have to start using. Are you running out of MCUs? The chart will indicate if you're running out of MCUs. If you start running out of MCUs, therefore you will increase. But it's not something that I would recommend, I'll try to figure out. No. Provision based on your data. The table will show you that. And start using. Right? Oh, if you're running out of, you move. Right? That's the simplest thing.
So is it also going to auto-scale D nodes, or is it just E nodes?
For now, it's only E nodes.
For now, it's only E nodes. Yeah.
We're working on that side.
We're working on the D nodes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Chris.
Yes, we auto scale on data as well.
Yeah.
Just because. Anyway, yes.
Is it
By
a
the time
question
you
of-
use it,
Yeah,
it will be auto
his
scaling
point.
with data.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you create now, no. If you create in 3 months, yes.
exactly.
If you have the data to load, we will scale it manually to fit right now. So yeah.
Yeah.
You guys now have to build that. You realize.
Yeah.
We are building. It's already
Yeah.
in the works.
Yeah.
I'm just being a little bit
Chris is on our
conservative.
stand-ups every day. We cannot
Yeah.
escape. Yeah. Exactly.
Question.
How is the DR strategy managed within itself? HA you mentioned, but about a replication to a different data center or something like that internally?
Yeah, out of the box, there's no click here and have DR. But if you need DR, we can set up 2 services, and we'll set up DR in the backend. It will work like MarkLogic DR. What you have to think about, okay, now you have 2 hubs, and therefore you have twice the consumption, twice the cost, because you have 2 active hubs.
Yeah, active.
Which means you can actually use the other hub for reading. Yeah, many customers do that. I was just talking about this. This is a common scenario. So if you need that, just talk to us and we'll set it up for you. You just need to provision 2 hubs.
What version of Data Hub do you provide right now?
This one out of the box runs with 4,
latest
but it can
4.
also run with 5 as well.
Yes.
But you have to choose, because if you choose 5, you cannot go back to 4. Okay?
Yep.
That's important information.
And data ingestion right now, it always has to be some form of text file for JSON.
It could be a CSV if you
Right.
think
Well,
about what it, or
I have like giant Oracle blobs, you know, like 300-page long legal documents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can dump those to CSV.
No, but you can ingest it as, it depends what you want to do with that.
what do you
blob,
want to,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want
If
to
you-
transform them to a JSON?
Do you need to
Okay,
search
so
it?
going back to the chart, one solution will be to use NiFi, and it was one of the connectors that will transform that to JSON, and you would load as JSON. So we fully support NiFi. We have a connector that it was built for MarkLogic in NiFi. That's a common approach. So you transform the data before you load it as documents, rather than just dumping that thing there.
Let's do one more question.
Yes.
So I'm still trying to get my head around relational databases versus MarkLogic.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's okay.
And we're talking about data loads here. And I'm used to commits after 100 or something like that. Does that same kind of concept go here when you're loading in thousands of documents or thousands of records? Is it an automatic kind of commit process? Is there things you have to configure for that, or how does that?
Yeah, there are many ways of ingest. I would describe one, the MLCP, which was actually the example that we run here. It was a command line that's called the MarkLogic content pump. So let's say you are getting from a relational database, you are getting a CSV. So what the content pump will do, it will create divide that in batches. And for each row in your CSV, will load as a document. And it will commit as batches automatically. There's just the size of the batch. I think out of the box is 1,000 documents
100,
per batch. That actually is also how we auto scale, because when you start throwing batches, it will figure out that, okay, there are many batches coming. It will start adding nodes and start to accelerate ingestion as well, because there is processing and indexing that consumes the nodes. So it auto batches for you, and therefore allows us to auto scale as well. That's the same that will happen with the data movement SDK. That's a Java API that will do the same. Grado will also do the same if you load through Grado. So it auto batches, it auto commits. Everything is transactional here. So if it fails the entire batch. Does that answer your question?
Yes, you can do one. You can define that batch size.
You can define. I'm just saying out of the box.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, kind of like in Oracle, you have the SQL loader, like the MLCP. It's kind of similar to that one. Yeah.
Okay, we'll be around. I am in the booth, and he is also there, and there are many other of our colleagues there.
Yes.
If you have further questions about Data Hub or Data Hub Service, we are there throughout the conference to help you understand better the overall offering here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.